Hello viewers, in our previous lecture on molecules of life, we had discussed the elements and functional groups present in the biomolecules. As already discussed, living organisms, whether they are microorganisms, plants or animals, are basically made up of the same chemical components that are carbohydrates, proteins, lipids and nucleic acids. Since we are discussing about the molecules of life, we have to appreciate biochemistry as the study of the way in which these components are synthesized and utilized by the organisms in their life processes. That means we have to discuss the mechanism of life processes. Biochemistry bridges the gap between the conventional chemistry and biology. Each life process is explained through its chemical rationale, and the role of this single process is interconnected to the general metabolic pool of living organisms. In other words, life is nothing but thousands of ordered chemical reactions. One can therefore claim that chemistry is the logical explanation of all biological phenomena. Let me first introduce you to some of the pioneers of biochemistry and their contributions, which has led to advancement of our insight into life processes. Let us start with Carl Alexander Newberg. He was pioneer of biochemical studies. He is often referred to as father of modern biochemistry. And fructose 6-phosphate is named after him and called as Newberg's ester. Newberg introduced the term biochemistry in 1903. The discipline has grown as one of the most important subjects explaining life and its functioning. The real push to biochemistry was given in 1828 when total synthesis of urea from lead cyanate and ammonia was achieved by Wohler, who thus initiated the synthesis of organic compounds from inorganic compounds. In fact, Wohler was trying to prepare ammonium cyanate by reaction between lead cyanate and aqueous ammonia. And in the process, he got ammonium cyanate, but this ammonium cyanate, so prepared, decomposed to ammonia and cyanic acid, which reacted reversibly to produce urea. That, in conclusion, we can say that when lead cyanate was treated with aqueous ammonia, ammonium cyanate was formed, but ammonium cyanate isomerized to form urea. As you can see on your screens, the molecular formula of ammonium cyanate and urea is same. And this was a vital blow, or I can say this, to the vital force theory. He was not trying to prepare urea in the lab. He was trying to prepare ammonium cyanate. And the ammonium cyanate formed, decomposed to give urea. And then Wohler reportedly wrote to his teacher Berzelius, who was a staunch believer of vital force theory. According to Berzelius, organic compounds could be synthesized only in nature under some mysterious force. And then Wohler wrote to his teacher Berzelius, and I quote, "I cannot, so to say, hold my chemical water, and must tell you that I can make urea without thereby needing to have kidneys or anyhow an animal, be it human or dog." In summary, he said that a biomolecule, that is urea, could now be prepared in vitro. Till now it was believed that urea can only be prepared in living organisms, in kidneys of animals, may it be human or dog. So this discovery was more or less accidental, as I've already explained, as he did not set out deliberately to make an organic synthesis to disprove vitalism. He was not trying to contradict Berzelius' theory of vitalism, and which was a notion championed by his own teacher, that is Johannes Jacob Berzelius, and he had no intention of doing so. But still, the believers of vital force theory did not believe this, because they said that the ammonium cyanate which was synthesized, in fact, isomerized to give us a structure which was urea. Later, Louis Pasteur during 1856-7 worked on fermentations and pointed out the importance of enzymes in this process. That is, fermentation is brought about in presence of enzymes. So if we are talking of fermentation of sugars, that it is the enzymes which will convert it into alcohol. The breakthrough in enzyme research was made in 1897 by Edward Buchner, who extracted enzyme zymase from yeast cells in crude form, which could ferment a sugar molecule into alcohol in vitro. So that means that in presence of enzyme zymase, Buchner was able to ferment, or was able to bring about fermentation of sugar, and he was able to convert it in alcohol in vitro, and this was not being carried out in a human body, or it was not happening in vivo. And then at the same time, Emil Fischer synthesized phenylhydrazine, a base that helped him to elucidate the structure of sugar molecules. So after seeing the work of pioneers who led to the synthesis of organic compounds and their relationship with biological process, I would be carrying the discussion further, and we will first familiarize ourselves with the four major molecules of life. And as I've already discussed in my previous lecture, the four major molecules of life are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acid. Now, if on your screens you can see a typical structure of a cell, and we know that the components of cell are made up of these biological molecules. So let us see how are these components made and what are the functions of these components. So if we talk of the cell wall is made up of cellulose, which is a structural carbohydrate. And if we proceed to chloroplast, then we find that in chloroplast we have grains of starch. And what is starch? Starch is a storage carbohydrate. Now if we go on to microtubules, so we find that these microtubules are proteinaceous in nature, and they are responsible of movement within the cells and that of cell. The next component is mitochondria, and mitochondria is made up of lipids, proteins, and DNA. And you know, mitochondria is also rightly called as the powerhouse of the cell, since ATP is synthesized here. The next important component of the cell are ribosomes, and we know ribosomes are made up of RNA and proteins, and we find that proteins are synthesized on ribosomes. Next we have a plasma membrane, and plasma membrane is made up of carbohydrates and lipids and proteins. The last very important component of the cell is the chromatin. Chromatin is found in chromosomes, and we find that chromatin has DNA and proteins. That is, chromatin is a part of chromosomes and it contains DNA and proteins, and we know that DNA is the genetic material of all living organisms. So now continue the lecture further. I will now be starting with the discussion in very brief of those of biomolecules, and we will start with carbohydrates. We know carbohydrates are chemically defined as polyhydroxyaldehydes or ketones or compounds which produce them on hydrolysis. So they may be simple carbohydrates like sugars, or they may be complex carbohydrates like cellulose, which is a structural carbohydrate, or it could be glycogen or starch, which are the storage carbohydrates. And if we talk of simple sugars, they are collectively called as saccharides, and saccharides comes from the Greek word saccharon, meaning sugar. And these saccharides have a free aldehyde or a ketone group, which acts as a reducing agent, and therefore these sugars are known as reducing sugars. Most of the monosaccharides and disaccharides are reducing in nature, the exception being sucrose. Sucrose is non-reducing because it does not have a free aldehydic or a ketone group. It does not have a potential aldehydic or a ketone group also. Now let us see the food sources which are rich in carbohydrates. As you can see on your screens, the cereals such as wheat and rice are rich in carbohydrates. Then there are fruits like papaya, apple, or oranges are also rich in carbohydrates. Some vegetables like Brussels, kale, these are also rich in carbohydrates. So in our daily life, we can get carbohydrates from these sources which are easily available. Now let us look into the biological function of carbohydrates. So carbohydrates, including sugars, are crucial to the biological processes of living organisms. Plants and algae produce millions of tons of carbohydrates each year through photosynthesis. And the main function of carbohydrates is to provide energy, particularly through glucose. The next class of biomolecules which are important are lipids. Lipids are organic substances that are insoluble in water but are soluble in organic solvents. Why are they insoluble in water? Because they are related to fatty acids, and we know that a fatty acid is made up of a tail which is composed of a non-polar hydrocarbon part, and it has a head which is polar in nature. So what we find that lipids are insoluble in water, and these lipids are utilized by the living cells. Now, what is the importance of lipids? Lipids play an important role in the cellular structure and are the chief source of energy. And you also know that they are the chief constituents of biological membranes in cells. That is, phospholipids are important constituents of membranes. The next class of compounds which are important are proteins. We say proteins are another class of indispensable biomolecules which make up around 50% of the cellular dry weight. Proteins are polymers of amino acids arranged in the form of polypeptide chains. And when we talk of the structure of proteins, we can classify it as 4 levels. That is primary structure, secondary structure, tertiary and quaternary. This can also be referred to as 1 degree, 2 degree, 3 degree and 4 degrees respectively. So as on your screens, now you can see the primary structure of protein. And what is primary structure of protein? In primary structure of protein, we find that the arrangement of amino acids is specific. That is, it involves the specific sequence of amino acids in a polypeptide chain. Say for example, as I have shown here, this is a dipeptide which is made up of, say, alanine and glycine. Now, since we have two amino acids, we can have two arrangements. That is, in one arrangement, glycine can be arranged to alanine. In the second arrangement, alanine can be arranged to glycine. And this change in the specific sequence of amino acids change the properties of the particular polypeptide or a particular protein. So the specific sequence of amino acids in polypeptide chain is very, very important. Now we go on to the secondary structure of a protein, which involves hydrogen bonds between sequence of amino acids in polypeptide chain folding in two ways. And because of this hydrogen bonding, polypeptide chain can be folded in two ways. One is the beta pleated sheets, and as you can see on your screens, and other is the alpha helix structure, which we shall be discussing in our subsequent lectures. Now we go on to the tertiary structure of a protein. So when we are talking of a tertiary structure of a protein, we are talking at the third level, and this refers to the conformation of the molecule, or in other words, I can say it refers to a three-dimensional shape of a protein with many more types of bonds between the alpha helix and the beta pleated sheets. That means the other types of bonds that we are talking of here would be the ionic bonds, dipole-dipole interactions, van der Waals forces, hydrogen bonds, and disulfide ridges. But what you have to keep in mind that the tertiary structure of protein will only involve a single polypeptide chain. That means it will involve folding of only polypeptide chain, which can be beta pleated and or alpha helix, and there we will have different types of bonds which will stabilize the tertiary structure and give it its particular conformation. Now when we talk of the quaternary structure of the protein, that means we are talking of the fourth level. And when we are talking of the fourth level, in this case what we find that in quaternary structure is made up of more than one polypeptide chains, and these polypeptide chains are also called as subunits. For example, if we look into the structure of biomolecule, which is hemoglobin, then what we find that this hemoglobin is made up of 4 subunits, among which 2 are alpha, that is 2 are alpha and 2 are beta subunits. Now let us talk of the functions of proteins. So when we talk of functions of proteins, what we find that proteins play both structural and dynamic roles. That is, myosin is the protein that allows movement by contraction of muscles. That means it is present in our muscles. And the most enzymes are proteinaceous in nature. We know enzymes are the biocatalysts that bring about reactions in biological systems, and most of them are proteinaceous in nature. Now the last category of biomolecules that I am going to discuss are nucleic acids. And as you know, nucleic acids refer to the genetic material found in the cell that carries all the hereditary information from parents to progeny. And we know there are 2 types of nucleic acids, which are DNA, that is deoxyribonucleic acid, and RNA, which is ribonucleic acid. So what is the function of the nucleic acids? As I have already said, the main function of nucleic acids is the transfer of genetic information and synthesis of proteins by processes known as transcription and translation. In transcription, DNA passes the message to RNA, and during translation, RNA gives message in the form of proteins to synthesize proteins and enzymes. So both of these nucleic acids are very, very vital. One is involved in the genetic transfer of genetic material, and the other is involved in the, and if we talk of them together, they are involved in synthesis of proteins and enzymes. So both of them are involved in the transfer of genetic material. DNA is involved in transfer of genetic material, and RNA is involved in synthesis of proteins. The monomeric units of nucleic acids is known as nucleotide, and as I have already discussed, it is composed of a nitrogenous base, a pentose sugar, and phosphate. Nitrogenous bases are in the form of heterocyclic rings. As you can see the structure of a nucleotide here, what we find that nucleotide has a nitrogenous base. Here I have shown the structure of DNA. We have a nitrogenous base, which is adenine, and then we have a pentose sugar, which is then linked to phosphate. And the DNA and RNA differ in the pentose sugar. That is, in DNA we have deoxyribose sugar, whereas in RNA we have ribose sugar. So DNA and RNA form the genetic material of the cell, both of them. And how do they form the genetic material of the cell? Because the sequence of nucleotides in DNA forms the transcript or the periodic table of life. So these four molecules are the common basis of all the living organisms on this planet. So in brief, I have discussed with you the four important biomolecules, which are carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. These are very important for all the living organisms. In my next lecture, now I shall be discussing as to can we consider water as a biomolecule. And for this lecture, I had referred to books by Carey Francis, that is on organic chemistry, McMurray Jones, organic chemistry by Wade, and of course Principles of Biochemistry, that is Lehinger's Principles of Biochemistry, and you can also refer to these books for your further studies. Thank you.